The Green Bay Packers are looking to take back the North in 2025 as they fell to the third best team in the NFC North. Now, with a lot of changes going on with their rivals, maybe this is the year they can get back if they hit free agency right. My name is Tyler, here with my brother Ryan, and we are going to break down our first ever mock free agency for the Green Bay Packers. Before we get into that, if you like the content that we put out and you want to get notified when we put out new videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel, tackle that bell, and while you're at it, leave a like and a comment. Let us know what you want to see the Packers do this free agency. And Ryan, let's pull up their list here. So, not too many free agents overall. A couple of guys that played a significant amount of snaps, but almost something that we'll talk about here in a second. But biggest news for the Packers when it comes to free agency seems like it's going to be around Jair Alexander and what happens with his future. Before we get into that, anybody here on this list that you think is a for sure come back, a for sure not come back, like a good sayonara? What are your thoughts on the free agents that for the Packers this year?
There aren't a ton of guys that I feel like are locks either way. It doesn't sound like Eric Stokes is going to come back. AJ Dillon is probably not going to come back. There may be a few other guys there, but there are a couple guys that I think pique my interest in potentially returning. Josh Myers there. Bo Melton is on or it's like earned rights free agent or basically an undrafted free agent contract
Mhm.
that expired, and so there are a few guys that I'm interested in. Corey Ballantyne, but we'll just kind of have to see as we get into it. One name though, as we start this process, is going to be Jair Alexander. Who was not listed there, so they originally have a cap space of about 48.8 million, and then freeing up or trading Jair Alexander frees up about 6 or 7 million this year, but it really frees up money next year. It gives them about 30 or so million in cap space in 2026.
Yep.
And so I feel like making that move here makes a lot of sense. They're paying him a lot of money. He has only played in 7 games, I believe, in each of the or this past season. I believe he played in like 16 in 2023. But that's just a lot of money to be paying a guy that is consistently injured and
You mean
only playing about half.
2022 when he
Maybe it
played?
might be 2022 with the last
Yeah,
time he
yeah.
played that many
I
games.
think he's played less than a full season combined over the last 2 years. And
Yeah.
so you're looking at the money that you're paying for him. It just doesn't work out overall. So I could see why they'd move him. I could see why they'd keep him also, to be honest, but because he's still one of the
Yeah.
best corners in the league. But I think a team's going to get him for a pretty fair price. But the Packers do get him off their books.
Yeah, and so it just makes a lot of sense, I think, for both sides. Jair Alexander can get a fresh start somewhere else, maybe with a different uh, training schedule to potentially stay healthy. The Packers can save that cap space, and so I will see how the situation plays out throughout the rest of the offseason. But that is the first move that we made, and that is really the only cut I think that we made. Uh, on this team, and it wasn't even really a cut. I do think for that trade, they'd probably get about a third or maybe a high fourth. Like
Hmm.
I look at New England maybe with like that 104 pick that would potentially be interested in uh trading that for him, but like I don't think the Patriots would give up 69 at that point. So
Yeah.
uh it's an interesting situation there with Jair, but let's get into the internal free agents. So you can see we re-signed Corey Ballantyne. We didn't bring back Eric Stokes, and obviously with Jair Alexander, that's uh, he's not on the team anymore in this situation. So bringing back Corey Ballantyne was pretty important, and then we brought back Josh Myers just for some continuity on the interior of that offensive line. Doesn't mean you can't upgrade that position, but at the same time, having somebody there who has that familiarity with Jordan Love, especially at that center position, I think is going to be really important.
Yeah. No, and that's we talked a lot about kind of who we'd want to keep and potentially not keep, and so these were the two guys that, and like their value overall too for what they bring, and potentially too if they do fall into a backup role as well. If you go and get somebody else through free agency or get somebody through the draft who's just better, then it's still not too much to swallow if you do end up having to move on from them, and potentially even too, you can sign very team friendly deals to make it easy to move on from them next year if you find somebody to replace. For example, just in the center position, I've been reading Drew Dahlman might be a big player that the Packers go after this year. I think that would make sense, especially too, just considering the center class and how important the center role is. And with the Drew Dahlman hitting free agency, Falcons in some cap situations, Drew, they might be able to entice Drew Dahlman to come play in Green Bay. So a lot of other different routes that they could potentially end up going. But a couple of the names that we did decide let walk to that they could potentially bring back just for maybe cheaper. Isaiah McDuffie is a guy that we thought as well. I think you already mentioned Bo Milton too, but we ended up just kind of letting that slide as well. If they do
Yeah.
end up bringing him back, it'd be for $1 million or $2 million or something like that. Nothing too crazy. And so trying to focus on some more of the key impact players here as well. And one of the areas that they really need to improve on is in that secondary. And we ended up maybe taking a very unique route here on what the Packers could do. But that being said, though, with how great this defensive line class is and how deep it is, I think the Packers are really going to focus in that area to really revamp that defensive line, that front seven to keep trying to improve. But on the flip side, though, the corner class is good, but not particularly nearly as great or as deep. But there are some pretty big names hitting free agency in the secondary. And so we actually decided to double dip. Ryan, who was the first guy that the Packers ended up selecting?
So the first guy was Charvarius Ward. So he has a little bit of, I don't say baggage because that's not the right way to say it, but he had I believe his daughter was born and passed away while he was in San Francisco. And he has stated that he just wants to get out of San Francisco like for his mental health. And he sat out this past season, I believe, for mental health reasons. And so
Yeah.
I think you pay him. He is a little bit older, but with that being said, when he's been on the field, he's been a fantastic player, and he also has a little less mileage. I think similar to like the Calvin Ridley situation where he was with the Falcons, he got suspended, then he sat out the next year for mental health reasons there. So he is like that year older, but he doesn't have the miles on his body at that point. So we went with a 43-year, $48 million contract. So he's going to get a top of the market offer. So that's about $16 million a year. I do feel like there might be like some performance incentives or guaranteed money kind of worked into this just to kind of protect the Packers organization. But with that being said, you get a top tier corner in Charvarius Ward.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I I understand why you'd want to move from Jair Alexander, but then to then go and replace him though with a guy like Travarius Ward, I think is absolutely worth it as well too.
Mhm.
And Ryan, then this is kind of where your idea came in, and that's where I think it makes sense to like if you're able to go and do it, and then also take somebody from a division rival as well. Why not go and add Carlton Davis also, put him across from Travarius Ford, really get one of the top secondaries in the league. Xavier McKinney had a great year last year. Evan Williams, Evan Williams had a great rookie year as well, coming from the fourth round. Keep developing him, and so I don't see. I actually kind of like that idea, especially too with how young the Packers offense is, especially in the skill position players and the way Matt LaFleur can really run that offense. Really focus on the defensive side of the ball, and these are just some of the top secondary players in the league, especially hitting free agency. And I think you can really develop the defensive line in the draft. So I like this route going with Carlton Davis. He did break his jaw. So I'm curious to see kind of what the recovery time is like that for a guy. I would assume he would be good uh, come training camp of this year, but I've also never, I don't think I've ever heard that coming from a football player before. So that's what's
Yeah.
very interesting about that injury.
Yeah, but no, like you well, one, that sounds extremely painful.
Yes, it
But
does.
two, I do feel like these two guys, when playing at a top level or at their top level, are two number one corners. And so I feel like going and adding them both to your secondary that does a lot of different things. This is a more complex defense in the NFL. And so I do feel like that is going and getting veteran corners as opposed to maybe trying to force a rookie in at here or there. I think makes a lot of sense. It totally changes the look of that room. it honestly turns it into a strength of this team. And then, as you touched on already, this draft is loaded with front seven talent. So whether you want to get a linebacker, whether you want to get a run stuffing defensive tackle, a pass rushing defensive tackle, an outside linebacker, a true hand in the dirt edge rusher, there are loads of guys in this, excuse me, in this class that can go and play any type of role that you want. So I like the idea of doubling up at corner in free agency and then addressing the front seven in the draft. Last but not least, we are going to address the front seven here in free agency. We're going to get Javon Kinlaw. We're going to sign him to a 1 year, $6 million deal. He's a former first round pick that has a lot of potential, hasn't really lived up to it in the NFL. He had a couple good seasons with the 49ers on his rookie contract, but that kind of got derailed a little bit by injuries. He didn't have a good year with the Jets last year, but it was the Jets, and so going to give him another chance here in Green Bay. And so I feel like that is a good value contract that has a lot of upside there as an interior pass rusher.
Yeah, yeah, and it once again too. I think with Green Bay, then this would put them at sitting around 15 million in cap space. I think that they're just a really well coached team, and similar to Pittsburgh, like there's just the Packers way of
Mm-hmm.
doing things, and so I trust that they're going to make the right moves here. We might have been a little aggressive in the secondary spot, but that being said, though, too, that's just a huge weakness for this overall team. And do they need to improve the front seven? Yes, but I think when it comes to where do we want to allocate our money, get the most for our funds, I think if they go heavy secondary and free agency, and then really focus on the front seven, and then maybe even to get like how they normally do, like a late round skill position player or maybe offensive line. I think that could be a route that they could end up
Yeah.
going. I will say if they were wanting to move on from Josh Myers, and then just kind of while we are here, Drew Dahlman is the guy that they would be looking for, or supposedly looking for, and he's going for about, according to Spot Track, about the same price, maybe 7 million or 8 million, and get him sign him into a more multi-year deal. If you look at PFF, I think Drew Dahlman is ranked in the middle of the pack when it comes to the centers. I know it is PFF, so maybe that's around. If you don't like Josh Myers or how much we paid Josh Myers there, maybe that's a route that they end up going. Actually, Drew Dahlman was the fourth ranked center on PFF, so a little bit better than above average. So it would be an improvement overall. It maybe be a little bit more than $7 million, but it's just interesting how they're going to handle that position because that's a very key position, and everything else on that offensive side of the ball, though, I do really like. So, but we'll have
Yeah.
to see. It's heavy secondary. I think heavy defense is going to be the main focus for the Packers when it comes to this offseason.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a fun offseason there for the Packers. Definitely one with a lot of activity. But I like what we did, and I think the Packers will be better. The biggest thing for the Packers is I think they just need to stay healthy for a full 16 games. They've had some consistency and health issues, I think, over the last couple seasons that have kept them from really making, really making a division push. Because I guess 2 years ago they did make the playoffs, but and they're playing really, really well in the playoffs. But
Well, they made the playoffs this year too.
oh, that's right. They got bounced in the first round.
Yeah, they lost to the Eagles pretty bad.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, forgot about that. But on that note, let's go ahead. Let's wrap up this video here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. It is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, leave a comment on what you thought of this mock free agency. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? Other than that, we'll see you guys next time.